Hello, everyone. Zainab here and Chimdi on the other side. Welcome again to Viz Review Live, a bi-weekly session where we review visualizations that we've been tagged in with the hope of like giving feedback and helping people to grow in their data visualization skills. I am Zainab. I am a data scientist based in London, and yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Chimdi for an intro.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Viz Review Live. My name is Chimdi. I am a data viz developer and designer based in British Columbia, Canada. And as Zainab mentioned, essentially, we're just here to offer support, give feedback, kind of pay things forward to the community by providing feedback to visits in hopes of helping people upskill, upgrade, and just have a better understanding of what good information, a good presentation of information looks like. So if you don't join in, check out the YouTube. Recordings are always going to be there, and you can always learn, even if you're not with us today.
Love, but I feel like you always do a much better job at describing this than
Nah.
me. Okay. Cool. I am going to share my screen and then I guess we can get started. Let me know if you do see my screen.
Yep, I see it right. It's there now.
Can I just do this? Okay, cool. Let's go into the first viz for today. Um, just hang on a
Hmm.
second. I'm trying to bring my screen share. I don't know what's going on. Okay, ignore. As long as you can see my screen, that's okay. All
Mhm.
right. Wow. Okay, this looks very interesting. Quite the impact. It's a piece by Karishma Darla. And Chimdi, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. Um, yeah, so I guess the first thing I notice here definitely looks more like a infographic style viz. And it looks like this is definitely talking to us about spaceware, enhancing space situational awareness. Interesting. I've actually never seen this kind of topic before, so I think it should be good. It gives a little bit of a summary there, which is nice. So I think the things that sort of work out well here, I think the theme, does a really good job of kind of positioning this as like, okay, space. You have like the
Yeah.
dark background, sort of like the starry type of viz, like universe. You have the little, thing there at the top right. So I
Yeah.
think, from that perspective, it does a decent job of kind of fitting that theme. I will also say, at least for me personally, from a design perspective, just individually, like the palette itself works. I think, there's a few things that I would change to enhance it. But I'd say, from that perspective, those things work. What would personally I change if I wanted to improve this? I would really adjust the layout a little bit to make it easier to just sort of follow and separate things. And so, I think just having a little bit more white space around things would really help. I
Yeah.
like that, that initial viz, I think is great. I think, if I were building this, I would probably just do like make it even bigger, do some type of summary around it because I think that's probably the viz that has the major piece of information. And I think, just adding some more context would really improve this, at least from an understanding perspective. So for example, if you look at the second chart, it says global contribution to space objects, and we have a bunch of circles. And so intuitively, we can assume that bigger circles have bigger contributions,
Yeah.
but we also don't know what that means, right? So contribution to space objects, like what is that and how does that work? And what is something interesting about that we're being told? So that those little bits and pieces of information, I think, would help uplift this a little bit. And particularly because when you pick a topic like this, you're instantly gonna grab people's attention. when you do that, you need to have something really solid to show. And so I think there's an opportunity for a little bit more explanatory context being added here. And that would really make this do a super, super amazing job of increasing that understanding. Because I do think that there's enough here in terms of catching attention, like those soft colors, they're decent enough, they work well. So I'd say a bit of white space to keep that separation, perhaps a little bit more explanatory text to help people understand. And, just something to keep in mind when putting out these kinds of visits, you want to make them impactful. So every chart should have a major point that's being supported. And if you need to add more context, do that. Let people really actually gain value by looking at that chart. So that's what I would say from my perspective. Initial start is really good, but I think there's opportunity to really like dig a little bit deeper with respect to just layering in that information and improving those insights so that people actually leave with quality understanding around this topic here. What do you think?
Yes, I feel like you've said it all. I also really like the colors. I think there's something about using design to communicate something, and I think this is very clear. The title of the visit itself is on theme with the color and the design choices that this author has made. I agree with everything that you said, especially I think like little borders and like spacing on the side will kind of give these things room to breathe. I really like this. So the idea of this, like, I'm also unfamiliar with this topic, right? And I think this is like a good way to like introduce someone. And so I was reading, I had a bit more time to read when you were like talking through. So just the little, I guess, text that is here. And I guess the idea of this whole thing is that there's so many like objects that are being accumulated around our planet. And so I feel like this
Mhm.
viz itself is very impactful. I feel like this viz could even just be like the V's, right? Just like the centerpiece right in the middle of the chat, and everything is just kind of like
Yeah.
supporting point. But I think because the idea is not for you to understand exactly what all the objects are, but for you to visually see the amount of things that are kind of like
Mm.
circling our planet. So for that, I think this is really effective. I
Yeah.
don't know, like I'm typically not a fan of like images, but I feel like here I think the image of the like Earth, I think it has its place here, and so I'm not mad
Mm.
at that, right? So I really like this one here. And then I think with bubble chart, again, here the idea isn't necessarily for you to like kind of like see the actual numbers, but to have a sense of like which countries are contributing most to this debris. So I think here the
Mm.
bubble chart kind of works. The only thing that I would say
Mhm.
is that this like legend, I don't love it. It just feels like it's hanging somewhere. And I know this is like
Mhm.
kind of classic out of the box Tableau. If you wanted to push this up a notch design wise, I would say maybe somewhere under the title you can use like Unicode, like color coded like Unicode, just to represent the object types, and just is right under the title. It feels local to that particular viz and the story, rather than it just being like hanging in the middle of these two like space. And it will also help
Mm.
to section the like storytelling a little bit, right? And
Yeah.
things feel a little bit
Yeah.
less congested. And so I think again that's really good. This chart, I don't think it's my favorite because here the idea is to, I guess, have a sense of like the distance from the earth, but I don't know that. I think the boxes or like the marks are too tiny for me to like
Mm.
read. I don't know that I need the actual full 2,078,500. Maybe just like, round it up to like 2.7 million. But also overall, I'm not able to conceptualize this particular chart here. I can't really see that distance that the author is trying to kind of show that, okay, this is how far some things, or like this is, yeah, how far some of the objects are. So I would want to rethink this vase, maybe use a bar chart, maybe even just use like a lollipop or something that just kind of shows that distance a bit more than it just looking like specks, specks of marks on like a blank space. So I would say this vis is not my favorite, but other than that, I really like the like a visual effect of seeing how, since 2025, 2015, there's just been like a spike. But then it also made me question because they said, okay, object count accelerating rapidly since 2015, but it also made me question what happened in 1999, I think, and then what happened
Yeah.
in 1982. And they could be obvious things like I don't know when the landing on the moon happened. It could also be like around this moment. But if those are like obvious key moments, I would love to have that annotated on the chart, right? Just so it provides more details because it's very like they're very obvious spikes, right? I think so these are like extra little like refinement that then like makes your visualization more insightful. And so
Mm.
yeah, just another note here. And I think this one, mean anomaly, I think I personally don't know what anomaly means here. And so maybe anomaly is being is of like the objects are being referred to as anomalies, but we've previously not done that,
Mm.
and this term has not been introduced. And so I think this is just like a minor, like just a picky thing. It's like if it's the object that we are referring to, let's use the object, and if anomalies is the right word to kind of describe, or that the word that is used to describe this debris in this context, then like let us know that that is what it is, and just like inform and educate your users. But overall, I think this is a good, like visually striking visualization that actually makes you want to engage. It catches your attention. It makes you want to say, okay, what exactly am I looking at? The final thing that I would say is I'm kind of missing a call to action, right? I want to know, okay, what are people doing about this? Are there organizations that are taking care of this? Is this somewhere I can learn more about it? And so I feel like just
Mhm.
having a link somewhere that I can click into to just read a bit more, or to see how we are solving this problem, or like, because this is about awareness, right? If I wanted to learn more,
Yeah.
just having that like call to action, I think is also like going to be really good. But overall, clean viz.
Yeah, just random comment. I
Yeah,
mean, just do you mind scrolling down? I just noticed
yeah.
something. So in the chart that's growth of space objects over time, like that line chart, jeez. I just noticed it's got only one color, which is like the faint yellow,
Yeah.
but all the other charts have like
True.
five objects. So is that line just a cumulative growth of all the objects? And if not, then is it showing only that yellow, whatever that is,
Right.
that
That's a
yellow,
good call out.
right?
Yeah.
If that's the case, then what happened to the other four? Maybe a note as to why, because I think that's the consistency across is good. You can see that legend breakout across everything except that one chart. So I think that's going to raise a
Yeah.
question. Either maybe color the line differently so that it doesn't look like it's just that one category,
Yeah.
or maybe do some explanation of the objects. Are they too small? Maybe their growth is not relevant enough in terms of size, those kinds of things. So yeah, just
Yeah,
something random
I
that
think that's a
just stood
brilliant
out.
point to call out because there could also be an opportunity here to take the analysis of up a notch by
Mm,
also trying to understand, okay, which of the objects actually contributed to like is contributing
the
most to this
most.
spike that we are seeing. And I actually thought
Yeah,
maybe this was like interactive and maybe I would be able to like click on it. But I think
cycle
understandably so,
through.
I don't think this vis is designed, it's like you said, infographic. I don't think it's designed to be like interacted with, but that would be a really
Mm,
nice touch.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, other than that, I think definitely good start here.
Yeah. Cool. Let me move on to the next piece that we have for today.
Makeover
Hmm.
Monday, I think this is
Is it?
Trump's
Yes,
approval
it is
rating.
Makeover Monday. And for
Yeah.
anyone that doesn't know, Makeover Monday is an initiative that is actually run by Chimdi and a couple of other people, where every week a data set is published, and everybody or like different people try to make their own version of visualizing that data set. I hope I explained that properly, but just a little plug
Yeah,
there.
definitely check it out. MakeoverMonday.co.uk. Anyone who you see their work and you're like, oh wow, that looks it's a high probability that they pass through Makeover Monday. So it's a
Yeah, true.
very solid training ground if you want to flex those data viz muscles. Because at the end of the day, you can do all the amazing analysis, all the discovery and predictive stuff with your analytics. But if you can't present it properly, all that effort goes in the toilet. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And that's my pitch for Makeover Monday. Check it out. You're not going to regret it.
Yeah, check it out. Okay, Trump's approval ratings 2025 versus 2026. I love the title. I feel like I love a clear title that tells me this is exactly what this vis is talking about. And it says every major demographic group tracks a decline in support year over year. Again, very clear what this vis is. And so I think that's a nice introduction. Now, visually, it's
Yeah.
very clean. I like that there's just all the white space and there's room to kind of focus on the chart and see, okay, what is this author trying to communicate? So I think layout wise, you can see there's a bit more thought, a thought has gone into um taking this beyond the basic, what, out of the box Tableau usage will do. And like just it feels cleaner. I also like the layout. There's something about just having a grid that just makes things easy to follow, right? So this is like a 2 by 3 grid, very clean layout, I would say. Now, looking into the chart, I think the first kind of feedback I will have is I don't know that the color is actually adding anything more or anything interesting to this,
Yeah.
right? So it is colored by, I guess, the demographics, so all adults, age, gender, race, and party. But I was kind of in my mind thinking, well, wouldn't it be more impactful to color the dimensions within each? So, for example, you have age, and then just like make all the different, age groups different colors. I think there's some type of like
Hmm.
gradient going on
Yeah.
here, but I feel like that way I know that okay, the different colors I'm seeing represent different age groups, and that can help me instantly like identify okay, which is what. So I think that's just like the first thing that called out to me, where it's like, okay, is color being used purposefully here? And so I think that's like the first thing. Now, chart wise, I think a slope chart is actually the right type of chart to use for this because it just shows you where something was and where it is now. And so you can just kind of see things going down and how much they've gone down. So again, I think that's like just a good usage of chat. A part of me is thinking, okay, what if we had like some type of bar chart that just actually showed the difference, right, in ratings? So for here, I kind of have to do the math myself. So this is 41% and 25%. I'm like, okay, that's dropped by, I don't know, 19 or like 15, 16 percentage point. Is there a case where we can actually just maybe then show as an accompany but like the percentage drop, or could we even have used the bar chart instead of this slope chart? As much as I like it, I think that's something that as an analyst I will want to kind of put side by side and then make the decision what best tells the story, right? What is the best insight? If the insight that you want people to take away is that, oh, like Trump's rating has dropped a lot or it has dropped a lot in a particular group, I would want to show that drop visually as well, even though I know like the slope chart is kind of doing that. But that's something that I would think about. And so I feel like other than that, yeah, I don't know that I have anything more to add. Chimdi, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Totally agree with basically what you said there. The title, very clear and easy to see, it aligns well, 25, 26.
Yeah.
And so, giving that summary there, every major demographic, et cetera, et cetera. So now we know exactly what we're expecting to see, right? So in terms of, feedback regarding the actual chart itself, what I would say is the choice of the chart itself does work. Now, just thinking about visual impact here, we have three at the top row, two at the bottom row. I actually think that it would be easier to show that drop more impactfully. Just line all five of those categories side by side and
Mm,
allow each slope chart to take up the entire width. That way, your slopes are a lot more, I guess, not exaggerated per se, but it's easier to see the angles because you just have the chart stretched out. So that way you can actually get to now compare side by side and see where are the bigger drops based on the larger slopes up or down, et cetera, et cetera. And so that way you get to actually see that. And even if people, like Zainab mentioned, even if people aren't able to see that huge difference, they can at least visually start to gauge that by looking at the chart. So I think that's the biggest critique I would say here. Other than, like the colors, like I don't think that's necessarily helpful. We already have different charts. And so it's already
yeah.
implied that these are different categories. So that to me, I think is what I would say is the white space around everything is clear. I'm such a huge fan of white backgrounds with data viz type stuff like this. So I really love that. If I were to add one more critique though, the borders are at the top and the borders at the side. I think that's an easy thing to just keep
Right.
them the same size. It's not that big of a deal, but these are like the tiny tweaks that I think really take something from very good to really great. So that's just one critique. Even spacing, and then maybe just keep all five charts side by side. That's what I think would make this more impactful. But overall, I think it's a good attempt, a good viz. Even if you didn't want to add any additional explanatory context via text, you can use something like this to actually just visually show. Um, and then other than that, I would say if there is any drops, and right now we cannot tell just because of how the charts are, but I think if you line them up side by side, you'll be able to see what dropped most drastically. And then if for whatever reason you wanted to add some explanatory context around that specific one that's most, you know, changed, then sure you can do that. But I think just that small change in the chart would make this visually more impactful in that the slope becomes much more visible. And now that they're side by side, you can actually compare across groups
Yeah.
if there are any outliers and drops. So that's what I think for this one. Definitely good. And just one of those two things I mentioned, I think could really make this more impactful in terms of, being able to use this and do some deeper analysis.
I think one more thing that I was like, okay, I can actually quickly answer how much this rating has dropped. And I feel like this is the all adults, I think minus 12 percentage. And I wonder if they could be like a sidebar that just has like a big number. Trump's rating approval dropped 12% across all adults in the US. And it's just like a big number, right? That shows that 12%
Mhm.
drop. And then this
Yeah,
split can now be like a two by two grid or like a four, like just a four lined
across
up
the
together, something
yeah.
like that. But I mean, good attempt. I think almost every other thing is
Yeah,
this.
because the slopes, like everything just looks like similar angle. The numbers are
Yeah,
not as like, yeah, I see
yeah.
like those big numbers and minus this percent or something like this. Yeah. But I think this is definitely a good start for sure.
Cool. All right, let's do. Maybe we'll be able to take both. Let's see how much time we have. All right. Oh.
I
Okay.
guess not.
I guess not. Oh, that
They're
sucks.
just
Financial risk.
yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next one then. This will be the final one for the day.
Oh, 9:59. Yeah, I think that timing wise, that this makes sense to be the last.
Okay, this
Okay.
okay, Chimdi. Okay, there are two tabs here.
Mm, okay.
Okay.
I mean, there's I'm just gonna pick at the low hanging fruit from this one. So I see two charts, right? I don't see two visits. That's just what I'm gonna start with here. So these are basically two charts. One chart is titled Feedback Airport Delay Analysis bar chart. So I can definitely see that. Okay, the axis here has top delayed. So definitely we can see that Santa Maria is the top delayed airport, but count of passenger ID 17. So I don't really know how that talk tells us about the delay. Is that just average passengers delayed per whatever? So I guess that's my first thing here. More context, just so we can have a deeper understanding and maybe just make this into a viz, not just a chart. That's what I would say. For the second one, I think same initial, just this is a chart. If you ask me, it's not really a viz. So, that's the first thing. But then secondly, I can see that the percentage of total passengers canceled, delayed, on time. Okay. So Santa Rosa has the highest proportion of delayed people. Okay, so I think this does give us a bit more information. We can kind of see, according to each airport's the status across, whether it's canceled, delayed, or on time. Um, this chart, I think that kind of works. Mm, yeah, I mean, if anything, maybe use a different legend for the different statuses so that, we can kind of see what's like if you want to use this gradient, maybe use a different color for each status so we
Right.
can see,
So
okay,
you mean
what's most
cancel,
delayed,
delayed.
canceled, all of that stuff. And yeah, I think this chart and the previous chart, they can be put together in the same viz into an actual viz about the airport delay. So that's what I would say, just composition wise, combine these two charts into an actual dashboard, put a proper title there, maybe give a little bit more context to help us understand that delay of 17 passenger count. What does that actually mean, right? Is like give us some context. There's 17 passengers. Like, what is that? What does that mean? And then all the way down to six passengers. One has 17, one has six. How does that tie into our delays? Give us that context. And then, of course, the feedback for that one, maybe different legend colors. And then also, if you want to add a summary, Santa Maria or Santa Rosa, whatever airport that was, has, more than half of its flights delayed, right? Because that kind of information there is useful. So the airline can understand, okay, we don't have too many cancellations. We need to focus on delayed flights. And maybe another airport might be like, okay, we actually have a lot of cancellations. So maybe we need to focus on, our offering so that, so there's a lot of valuable information there. I think just putting a bit more information to make it actionable would be one of the biggest recommendations here. Improve the information so that we can act on the insights. Tell us why it matters. And then from there, we'll know. It's like, the whole thing everyone says, like, what, then what, so what, whatever that thing is. So yeah, make it actionable. That's what I would say for this one. What do you think?
I think this author is probably relatively new to
New.
Tableau.
Yeah.
And also I
Yep.
know
Yep.
that
Yep.
some people do send like the assignments from school. So I'm guessing, I don't
Mhm.
know, but this might be one of such cases where it's like a project-based thing and you have to do it. Now, the first thing I would say
Yeah.
is that the sizing. So when you build a dashboard, sometimes you do, so in Tableau, by default, you have the automatic sizing that just like
Yeah.
expands
Yeah.
based on the
Yeah.
screen size. And what I would say is that someone just joined almost at the end. But what I would say is that like the automatic screen size is not working here. You just have a bar chart, right? Actually control the size, make it like, I don't know, 300 by 400. Now, I have seen
Hmm.
very effective charts where it's just a single bar chart, but it's so
Yeah.
insightful. So all I'll say is that, for example, feedback airport delay analysis, this underscore is not really how you would write. Almost like you've kind of just like put what is in a data set, make the title bolder, put it there and say, this is, give a bit more context, right? This is, and it's not really an analysis. We are just showing top delayed airports in XXS country by XXS, dimension. And I think just having that as a bold title and maybe a subtitle for anything you want to call out, cleaning things up. For example, do we really need the grid lines? Maybe even the axis lines is the axis name is not necessarily important if we already have it in a title. I think we can also kind of make things smaller. So I feel like little things like that will take it up a notch. And I have definitely seen like just a single bar chart, like visualization that is impactful. But I feel like here, in addition to everything that Chimdi has said, just giving this a bit more title, fixing the sizing, because this doesn't need to take up the whole space. Actually letting us know what country this is, why we are looking at it, what dimension, like 14 number of passengers sounds very low for like an airport. So it's like, are we looking like an average per day, an average per hour? What is that, right? And for this one, I again a title, status distribution, but I just make that much more impactful, change the sizing. I personally do not like this color, it's throwing me off. So I mean this is a personal like thing. Maybe choose a different color. But other than that, I actually like it map. I think it just allows you to visually quickly scan, what is going on. But I think just putting a bit more details about why this matters and like fixing the sizing, I think we'll add the little design details that will take it up a notch. Also, do we need the color legend. I mean, these are things you need to think about. Like, is the color legend actually adding more, or is it like okay that we are just showing like the skills? So I feel like these like tiny design decisions are the things that will really help take your views and clean it up and make people want to actually spend time to understand the information and the insight that you're trying to communicate. Also, it looks like there's something broken in the tooltip where it says this value represents the frequent delayed flights at airports. It's actually the flight delayed. Again, that's something that I wouldn't have, you know, known because it says count of passenger ID. So there's a bit of a contradiction here because you've not really like,
Yeah.
if they're taking time to really create this tooltip, they'll think through, okay, is it flight? How can I make that show up? And kind of make the insight or the metric a bit more obvious. So I think um those are like the minor things that I have to say, in addition to everything that you already added, Chimdi.
Yeah, and I think that those are good points. Overall, the one thing I'll just add that, you know, I respect, utilization of like complicated charts and all this type of stuff. However, one of the things that I do love about simple charts like bar charts and like heat maps is you can actually really spend some time dressing them up, thinking through
Yeah,
your labels, your annotations, like, you can really apply a lot of designing thought processes to simple charts to make them more impactful. And so that's something that I would say to leverage is like sometimes you can do some complex analysis with complex charts, but when given the opportunity and you are with a simple chart, just use that opportunity to really squeeze everything you can out of those charts. Like something like this that's on the screen right now,
it's just a
it's
bar
just
chart.
a basic bar chart, but
Yeah,
look how much information and how impactful it is just with design thinking and just thinking through how can I make this more impactful? So this is a perfect example that Zainab has pulled up on the
yeah,
screen. So I'm glad that thanks for doing that. Thanks for doing that. Yeah, this is a perfect example of where simplicity shines.
yeah, yeah. And we are almost out of time. So this is going to be the last viz that we review today. So thanks everyone for joining and check out our YouTube for past recording, lots of insights there. And hopefully we see you in 2 weeks. Again, I'm going to stop sharing.
All right.